Thanks for joining in this insightful webinar on 7 conversation skills for highly effective managers. This webinar is brought to you by Imarticus Learning and eZone Bangladesh. We have with us Luis Gonzáles. He's the Chief Product Officer and Chief Subject Matter Expert from Fierce Conversation. Fierce is one of the top 20 leadership brands across the globe, and he's joined from Mexico today, though he works out of Seattle office. Thanks, Luis, for joining this. I know it's very early for you in the morning.
Good to be here, Pankaj. Good to be here, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. So, Luis, if we could just move ahead, let me start this webinar with a brief introduction about Imarticus. Imarticus is India's largest edtech company, and our mission is to upskill and fill the gap between academia and the industry. We are into business to business, we are into B2C, and we are also into academia. The areas which we highly focus is banks and financial industry, technology companies, and fintech and big data. We offer the modes of delivery which we offer is online, blended, hybrid, and we are truly a global company. Just move ahead, Luis. In terms of our offerings, we are pioneer in the banking and financial domain, and we offer all the domain trainings, whether it's domain, whether it's sales, whether leadership in banking and financial world. Other area which we are highly specialized is fintech and blockchain, and we are the leading players across the globe in fintech, analytics, and technology. We also have programs in digital marketing and SEO. Let's move ahead. Today we have, this event is brought to you by eZone. eZone is one of the largest HR outsourcing company in Bangladesh. They are our partners in Bangladesh, and it's a 40-year-old company, focuses on HR outsourcing and salary surveys and assessments. So let's dig deep into this event. We have Luis with us. Luis brings in almost 2 decades of experience, both in designing the programs, in doing he's a subject matter expert for Fierce Conversation, and he has worked with brands like UST Global, Microsoft. He lived in India and lived in many countries, and I think traveled more than 20 countries across the globe. So welcome, Luis, in this event, and over to you for this event.
Thank you for the warm welcome and the introduction, Pankaj. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Luis Gonzáles, coming to you from Mexico, based in the US, working out of the US region. I'm a master facilitator, trainer, and global executive with Fierce Conversations. Fierce Conversations is one of the top 20 leadership training companies globally. I'm really excited today to bring you all this thought-provoking, motivating, hopefully motivating webinar on the 7 conversation principles of highly effective leaders. I partner with clients to transform organizational cultures by training leaders on how to have what we call fierce conversations, effective communication. We're going to talk a little bit about that shortly. I partner with these organizations transform their communication cultures and solve the toughest business challenges. Now, today we're going to talk about, first of all, I'm going to introduce to you some case studies. I want to present to you some of the success stories that we've recently had with a couple of organizations. Then we'll talk about what is a fierce conversation? What do we mean by a fierce conversation? And then I'll share with you, as part of Fierce Conversations, there are 4 objectives to get out of a fierce conversation. And of course, the main topic for today is the 7 conversation principles of highly effective leaders. These are the tools that you will be able to use immediately after this webinar to improve your conversations and thus your results. So I'll start now with sharing a story of how one of our clients by the name of Christus Healthcare. Christus Healthcare is a multinational healthcare organization. They have medical centers in the Southwest of the United States. They also have medical centers in Chile, Colombia, and Mexico in Latin America. They used our feedback, a conversation model, to help improve communication in their organization and thus drive results. Now, here were some of the challenges that they were experiencing at the time. Christus executives felt that the organization had fallen into a trap that many organizations face. They had developed a culture of being too nice. Associates at all levels had mistaken Christus's value of compassion with avoiding difficult conversations that needed to take place. Difficult conversations like giving someone constructive feedback. Many leaders avoided having conversations that involved feedback about their team's work, and frontline associates were also confused as to why they were not receiving any critique from their managers. So with lack of feedback from leaders throughout the organization, some of the associates had felt, or some of the associates actually became disengaged from their work. Through some leaders' unwillingness to have these conversations, Christus was concerned that the associates felt the culture failed to encourage or empower their associates who were not yet in a managerial role. They were not open to hearing their opinions or ideas. Christus leaders knew that without the participation of the entire staff, they were missing out on a wealth of opportunities, a wealth of ideas, talent, and ultimately this was a cost to the organization. So to add to the cultural challenges that I just mentioned, Christus had consolidated its corporate offices from 3 geographically dispersed locations into 1. And in the process of doing so, they lost about 60% of their corporate staff in that process. They knew they needed to rebuild the relationships with their remaining associates. Christus leaders sought a partner that could help them address these changes with their staff and also enhance the company culture and the organization. So they sought out our help. And the solutions, determined to make a change, they sought our help. And I personally partnered with them and my team at Fierce, and we led a leadership program that would assist, or that did assist in improving the company culture. Christus turned to us at Fierce because Christus's company's core philosophies and approach to conversation mirrored our also Fierce's values, particularly the value of integrity and the importance of relationships. So Christus wanted to reinvigorate the interactions between colleagues through honest, meaningful, and authentic conversations. So I worked with the talent management team at Christus. I helped them develop a leadership foundations training program that concentrated on 4 specific skills: delegation, team conversations, confrontation, and coaching. The current leaders, including managers and executives and associates, were the first to be trained. And the Christus team felt that if their leaders could understand and adopt the Fierce practices effectively, they could then teach those who reported to them this new skill set and eventually lead to an overall shift in culture. And so they made sure to have Fierce facilitators within all of their major markets to maintain and sustain that cultural shift in the organization. So they even had their own associates become trained to deliver Fierce conversation workshops within their own organizations, or their own organization. And what were the results? We remain a close partner to Christus Healthcare even till this day. The results were, as you can see here, 50% reduction in executive turnover rate, a 36% increase in promotion rate, 81% retention rate, 73% improvement in targeted competencies. Now, as I mentioned, We remain a close partner with Christus Health, working with them still to this day, assisting in the advancement of teaching and organizing their training programs. But the development isn't scheduled to stop. The emphasis started on the leaders of the organization, and now the focus is shifting to the younger associates, the freshers, and the ones with less tenure, with the intention of empowering them to be leaders from the beginning. So by implementing Fierce's approach to communication, Christus created an environment that appreciates feedback and encourages conversations that solve problems and foster creativity. The partnership we've made with Christus has made them better positioned to function more effectively through relationships, through culture, but not only that, to thrive as an organization. I'd like to share one more story with you as well. This is another one of our clients, Coast Capital Savings. They're a large financial services organization in Canada. They have used our feedback conversations to drive results as well. So back in 2019, our client had their employees take a Gallup survey to find out how happy they were within the organization. The main objective was to find out if employee engagement had increased within the organization since the previous survey in 2016. And what the results of this survey showed were zero improvement. The major issues employees at director levels and below flagged were this. They were being asked to tick a box to show the organization was being collaborative, but the senior leaders were not really interested in listening to associates. Development discussions were not productive. They were not robust enough. Top talent was becoming frustrated with the lack of authentic development discussions, and they were leaving the organization. And employees who were happy with no feedback and avoided difficult conversations were staying with the company. So it was clear from this survey results, there were problems with trust in leadership. Simply put, people did not feel heard, and it was causing them to feel frustrated, and it was causing them to lose trust in the leadership in the organization. Excuse me. So Fierce, well, let me back up. What was a disheartening conclusion from that survey actually turned into a blessing in disguise that could not have been timed better for this organization. You see, at the same time the employees were taking this survey, several other employees had recently attended a Fierce Conversations workshop in New York City where Fierce feedback was taught to them. When they came back from the class, they immediately told their colleagues that they had the answer to finally solve their engagement problems. They needed to reinforce the need for communicating authentically on all levels within the organization. Basically, simply put, they needed to foster a culture of open feedback. So currently, after connecting with us, the organization began teaching Fierce feedback to their senior leaders through certified facilitators. Once those classes were complete, all other employees were encouraged to participate in the Fierce classroom, and more than 90% have currently done that. So what came next was truly extraordinary. Our clients said they could see a shift in how employees viewed feedback. They were confident asking for feedback, and they felt more empowered within the organization to offer feedback to others. They told us that employees had been incredibly enthusiastic in the Fierce classroom, and they had been solving problems with their coworkers on the spot with feedback. Morale has vastly improved within the company as well, and employees have been reporting back that they've actually been using and practicing the Fierce feedback model that was taught to them in the workplace. So yearly revenue increased after the first year. Yearly revenue increased by over $300,000 US. Employee engagement improved measurably. Executive conversations increased amongst leadership. individual effectiveness scores increased company-wide, coaching scores improved by 23%. So these are just two case studies of organizations that I have personally partnered with that had serious problems in terms of the culture of communication in their organization, and it was seriously affecting their results. After bringing fierce conversations in to help them solve this communication problem, you've seen the results I just shared with you. So let's take a deeper dive into what is this that we're talking about today, fierce conversations. Before we get to the 7 habits of effective leaders, let's start with, what do we mean by a fierce conversation? Look, conversations have the power to transform our careers, our businesses, our relationships, and even our lives. If conversations are that important, it's time for us to start engaging in them more effectively. It's time to start having fierce conversations. This is a foundational belief that we have here at Fierce. Our careers, our companies, our relationships, and our lives either succeed or fail. Gradually, then suddenly, one conversation at a time. As I said just a moment ago, conversations have the power to change things. They have the power to change the direction of our careers, change the direction of our businesses, our relationships, and our lives. So that's why it's important that we're here talking about this today. The simplest definition of a fierce conversation is this. A fierce conversation is one in which we come out from behind ourselves, we come into the conversation and make it real. So what does it mean to make it real? What do we mean by make it real? We mean honest, authentic, transparent, candid, true, curious. And while some people are afraid of the real conversations, it's actually the unreal conversations that ought to concern us, because the unreal conversations are incredibly expensive for our organizations and for us as individuals. Many leaders say they understand the importance of being transparent in conversation and leadership. But let's be honest, we human beings tend to avoid being transparent and candid in conversations because we may feel nervous at the thought of being transparent. In other words, we get nervous at the thought of saying what's really on our minds and saying what really needs to be said. We may fear backlash. We may fear fallout or fear looking wrong in front of other people, fear of being seen as not going with the flow, not being a team player. But as I mentioned, it's the unreal and inauthentic conversations that really ought to concern us, because those are the most costly to any organization and us as individuals. So what are the costs? Let's talk about that. Costs of unreal conversations. We should have a poll of the cost of unreal conversations. I'd like to bring in the poll and see what your thoughts are here. Do we have a poll coming up for that?
No, we don't have a poll today.
It's okay. Well, let's talk about that's fine. We won't do the poll,
We'll
but
send
let's
them
talk
the poll
about
after this event.
Yeah, absolutely. Think about the costs associated with unreal conversations in the workplace. Duplication of effort, rework. Anyone here on the call with us today like rework, like doing something all over again? Okay, let's continue with that. What other costs associated with unreal conversation? Loss of clients, loss of customers, loss of face value. And think about it. Unreal, inauthentic conversations, surface conversations, conversations that don't get to the heart of the matter. In some verticals, in some industries, it could be someone's life. Think of the costs associated with unreal conversations in healthcare. For example, How about aviation? For example, you may remember in the last couple of years, there were 2 747 jet airliners that took a nosedive and killed over 600 people. All of that was due to missing conversations. Ineffective communication caused that. So there are many costs to unreal conversations, ineffective conversations, surface conversations, unreal conversations, as we call them. As you think about your own organization, think about the costs of those unreal, inauthentic conversations in your domain, in your organizations. What are the costs to the organization? What are the costs to the team? What are the costs to you as an individual in terms of your own stress, perhaps, of unreal conversation? So yes, many costs, as I've already mentioned, some of these mistakes, rework. How about attrition, losing good people? And there's a cost to that. You've lost good people and there's a cost to replace them. I've already mentioned lost clients and customers, all of the above and more. Sorry about that. I missed a slide there. There we go. So let me pause for a moment and just say, that's why this is so important that we're here talking about this. We know sometimes in the workplace, there are things that we should point out. There are things that we should say. There's feedback we should give to others around us to help them reach their goals. We should also ask for feedback when we are not sure if we're heading towards our goals. Sometimes we need to confront behavior or actions in the workplace. And when we avoid these conversations, these are the costs. These are the costs. So the costs are great. And as I already mentioned, in some verticals, in some industries, the cost could be someone's life. Again, think of healthcare. If you were about to go into surgery, you know you want to be sure that everyone is having effective communication, the doctor, the nurses, the surgeon, the person who cleaned the utensils that are going to slice you open. You want to make sure they have good, effective communication before you go under anesthesia, right? So this is why it's important. We're here talking about this today because the costs are great. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to share with you 4 objectives of a fierce conversation. What do we expect as a likely outcome of what we're calling a fierce conversation? I'll remind you what we just said. Let's go back to our slide just a moment ago. A fierce conversation is one in which we come out from behind ourselves, we come into the conversation, and we make it real. We show up authentically. We show up and we speak and we say what needs to be said. And so with that, now let's move on to 4 objectives of a fierce conversation. What do we want to get as an outcome of a fierce conversation? Here are the 4 objectives. Number 1, interrogate reality. Interrogate reality. Why? Because no plan survives its collision with reality, and reality has a habit of changing. We've all seen that in the last 2 years with this global pandemic. Reality changes, and when it does, it complicates our ideas about how things were supposed to go. And then to make things even more complicated, my reality, the way I see things, might be quite different from your reality or my co-workers' reality. They may see things completely differently than I do. They may have a completely different perspective than I do. Only by interrogating reality can we get a complete picture from everyone. That'll help us make the best possible decisions for our organizations. So interrogating reality means getting curious in a conversation, asking the person in the conversation, tell me how you see this. What are your ideas? What is your perspective? How did you arrive at this conclusion? Help me understand your understanding of this. That is what interrogating reality looks like. Simply being curious. And note, it's interrogate reality, not the person. So you can get the pressure off if you were a little nervous about that word interrogate. It's interrogate reality. It means in the conversation, get curious, ask questions. When we do that, We provoke learning. That's the second objective. Who's learning? Everyone's learning. My learning, everyone in the conversation. How did we provoke the learning? By interrogating reality. So interrogating reality means, how do you see this? Tell me what your perspective is. When I ask those questions in a conversation and the person responds, I now learn how they see things. I learn their perspective, and I'll share with them my perspective as they interrogate my reality. Thus, learning is provoked. I see things in a whole new way. I now understand how the other parties see things. It doesn't mean I necessarily agree with it, but it means that I understand their perspective. Learning, I've learned their perspective. I learned how they see things. When we do that, we're better equipped to tackle the tough challenges. That's our third objective of a fierce conversation, is to tackle tough challenges. We don't want to avoid any tough challenges that come up in the conversation. Our human nature is to avoid tough conversations or challenging conversations, or conversations we think are going to be tough and challenging. Okay? Address them. When tough challenges come up, address them immediately. Don't shy away. We've already discussed the costs of unreal conversations, what to speak of missing conversations. So in the process of interrogating reality, learning together, and tackling our tough challenges, our relationships with one another should be enriched. Our relationships with one another should be enriched. This is important, and this is often the objective that gets forgotten or overlooked. It's possible to interrogate reality, provoke learning, tackle tough challenges, and still leave other people feeling devastated or angry or frustrated. Fierce conversations enrich relationships. That's key. Key to a fierce conversation is to enrich relationships with others, even when we see things differently, even when we see things completely differently, when we have a different perspective. So these are our objectives of a fierce conversation. Now, what I want to get to today, the main topic of today, is the seven principles of highly effective leaders. So we've discussed so far up to this point what a fierce conversation is. We've discussed the costs associated with unreal conversations or missing conversations. We've just now covered the four objectives. These are the what will I achieve? What do I want to get as an objective of a fierce conversation? Now it's time to turn our attention to the seven principles, the how. How do we have a fierce conversation? What tools do I use in a conversation to make them more effective? What tools can I use to make my communication more effective and thus make me a more effective leader? These are these seven principles, and I'm excited to introduce them to you now. As we work through each one of these seven principles, I'm going to ask you to select one that you want to focus on in the next 30 days. All of them are important, as you will see, but I'm sure one of these seven principles may resonate with you, may even just jump out at you, or may, at the very least, have your name on it. You'll recognize it when you see it. You'll say to yourself, oh, that's probably what I need to work on. So keep that in mind as I go through these seven principles. I want you at the end of it to select one for yourself that you will focus on in the next 30 days to really hone in on and focus on to improve in the next 30 days to help you improve your leadership communication skills. Our first principle, master the courage to interrogate reality. Excuse me. Now, we just spoke a moment ago about interrogating reality, okay? Interrogate reality is the first objective of a fierce conversation. What do we want to get out of a fierce conversation? Now we're saying master the courage to do it, okay? Why do you think it takes courage? Well, guess what? If I interrogate reality, I might find out I was wrong. I might find out I have to change. I might find out there's some action I have to take. If I interrogate reality, I might find out I was part of the problem or I was part of the issue. That's scary for a lot of us, right? But look, as I mentioned earlier, reality is constantly changing. We know that. Reality has a funny habit of changing on us when we least expect it. And what we decided was most important for us to focus on yesterday may not be true today. Not only that, your reality is different, often very different from my reality. Things change, life changes, people change, we change. And when we change, we forget to announce it. We forget to tell others. We don't think about that. Life is changing all the time. So consider this. In order for us to stay current with a constantly changing reality, we've got to constantly interrogate reality, interrogate the reality of others, right? Excuse me, great leaders, we're all great leaders here. Great leaders want to know the truth. How do we get to the truth? By interrogating reality. Weak leaders, ineffective leaders just want to be right, okay? Good leadership, strong leadership is not about being right. It's about making the best possible decisions and leading others in a good way. And this is one of the ways that we start doing that. The first of the 7 principles, master the courage to interrogate reality. I'm just noticing the chat. You're absolutely right, Quasi. Interrogate reality, not the person. So if anybody's getting nervous about interrogation, don't get so nervous. Interrogate reality, their reality. How do you see this? What are your thoughts on this? Thank you for that comment. I appreciate that. Let's move on now. So that was the first principle, master the courage to interrogate reality. Here's our second principle. Come out from behind yourself into the conversation and make it real. You might recognize this. This is basically the definition of a fierce conversation that I shared with you a few minutes earlier. We talked about making the conversation real. We talked about the cost of unreal conversations. So what does it mean? What do we mean to come out from behind yourself? Well, if you think about it, oftentimes we put on a different face or a different mask for different situations. I'm saying that proverbially speaking, we don't wear a mask, but we mask ourselves for different situations. In other words, we tend to mask what we really think and feel in order to be what we think the situation calls for us. We mask what we really think and feel, and we wind up saying what we think others want us to say, or what we should say, or what others expect us to say. Think about it for yourself. How many times have you been in a team meeting when you decided to just sit back and not say a word, not engage? Okay. I was in a workshop recently where one person told me that she always tried to project the image she imagined others wanted her to project. She had one face for coworkers. She had one face for her boss, a face for her customers and clients, then a different face when she was a mom at home. You remember my comment earlier, while many of us feared the real conversation, it's the unreal conversation that ought to concern us. Those are the most costly to any organization or even us as individuals, right? So come out from behind yourself, come into the conversation, engage, and make it real. Say what's on your mind. Say what you really need to say. Say what needs to be said. Now, our principle number 3 is about being fully present in all of your conversations. Number 3 is be here, prepared to be nowhere else. As I said, be fully present in your conversations. How many of us multitask? I can tell you right now, sometimes I think I'm one of the best multitaskers. I feel like I'm really good at it. Science has shown, however, that we human beings cannot possibly focus on more than one thing at a time. You cannot do it. But let's just say, for the sake of conversation, you can. Let's say you can multitask. But what message does it send to the other person when they're trying to have a conversation with you and you're busy typing an email or busy doing some work? Have you ever been in a conversation where that happens, where you're trying to have a serious conversation with someone and they're busy typing away? And maybe they look at you and they say, go ahead, carry on, I'm listening. But they continue typing. What message does it send to you? What message does it send to you if I'm multitasking during our conversation? You may think, or the message may be, that you're not valuable, that you're not important enough for me to stop what I'm doing and focus on the conversation. We have so many distractions these days. My gosh, pings, messages, notifications, pop-up windows. The challenge for us these days is to remain fiercely present in our conversations with others. That way it sends a message to that person. We value them. We value what they have to say. We value their time, actually. So in our conversations, be present. Shut your laptop. Turn your phone over, put it on do not disturb, and give eye contact to that person. If you're on a Zoom call like this or any other platform, turn on your camera so that the person can see that you're present, so that the person can see you are engaged with them, okay? And if you cannot be fully present at that moment when you're engaging in a conversation with someone, tell them, hey, can I finish this work so that I can give you my full undivided attention? Your time is important to me. I just need to finish this. Can you come back in 5 minutes? Can you come back in an hour? I want to give you my full attention. What does it feel to just hear those words when someone would tell you that? What message does it send to you if someone were to tell you that? Hey, can you come back in 5 minutes so that I can give you my full attention? I value your time and I really want to hear what you have to say. Talk about enriching relationships. If somebody said that to me and they really mean it, that develops trust. That engages me in wanting to, that makes me want to engage with them more. It builds trust and enriches our relationship. So going back to this principle, third principle, be here, be present in the conversations, be here, prepared to be nowhere else. Our fourth principle is tackle your toughest challenge today. This is actually the third objective of a fierce conversation. Remember, a few minutes ago, I shared the 4 objectives. The third objective was tackle tough challenges. Now we're adding the word today. How many of you procrastinate when it comes to difficult conversations? I know I do sometimes. Difficult conversations, sometimes we procrastinate them. They're unpleasant. Sometimes we don't want to have them. But when we identify and confront the real obstacles in our way, and when we stay current with everyone around us who's important to us in our jobs, we free up energy. We travel lighter and agenda free. We have an expression here in the United States, maybe you've heard it in Bangladesh or wherever region you're sitting in today. I finally got that off my chest. It's an expression we use when we've been holding on to something that we've been wanting to say to someone. And then we finally say it. we feel a sense of actual relief. It's actual a physical feeling that we feel when we finally communicate something that we've been holding on to, right? This is what this principle is talking about. Tackle that tough challenge today. Don't procrastinate on the difficult conversations. Science and research have proven that when we don't tackle those tough challenges, when we hold on to these issues and we don't discuss them, we continue problem solving in our sleep. Our brains, this region of our brains that problem solves, shows active even when we're sleeping, when we're not addressing these tough challenges. So that's even another reason why it's important. Tackle your toughest challenge today. Address it head on and move on so that you can focus on more important things. Oftentimes when we're not tackling that tough challenge and it stays in our brain, it's hard for us to focus on the real important things that we need to do in our jobs and our roles. So tackle your toughest challenge today. Our fifth objective is obey your instincts. We're using the word instincts here. Some of you may call it your heart. You may call it your gut. You may call it that little voice. We're using the word instinct here. I think you all know what we're talking about. So pay attention to that. We all have that information agent inside of us that sends us messages all day long. So when you're in conversations with others in the workplace, listen to your instinct or listen to your gut, listen to your heart or your head, whatever you call it. Pay attention to that. There's something there. So for example, if in a conversation, your instinct tells you, ask more questions, keep interrogating reality. There's more to be understood here. There's more information to come out here. Ask more questions. If my instinct was telling me that in a conversation, I would do it. On the other hand, conversely, if in the conversation, I've asked a lot of questions and my instinct tells me, okay, let it be, allow for some silence, let them think about it, let them process the questions you've asked, then I would pay attention to that instinct and I would obey it. I would not ask questions. Think to yourself, ladies and gentlemen, how many times have you said to yourself, I knew I should have done that, or I knew I shouldn't have done that? That's your instinct talking. Your instinct was telling you to do something, you didn't follow it, and later you regretted it. Or conversely, your instinct was telling you to do something, you didn't do it, and you later regretted it. So this is what we're telling you now. In the conversation, if your instinct is telling you something, there's something there. Pay attention to it. Obey your instincts. Now, obey is a strong word. I'm not saying, you know, if your instinct is telling you to do something that is going to harm someone or get you fired, then of course, you better pause for a moment and double check what the results are going to be of your actions. But tune in to that instinct. Pay attention to that little voice inside you in conversations. Maybe you call it your intuition. Pay attention to that. There's something there. We know that from our own personal experiences. Number 6 is take responsibility for your emotional wake. What is a wake? A wake is a ripple effect. A wake is what a boat leaves behind in the water as it's moving forward, a ripple effect. Each of us leaves a ripple effect. We each leave a wake after our conversations are over. Our wake could be an afterglow. I have worked for leaders that have left an afterglow even when they've had difficult conversations or messages, difficult messages to deliver. I aspire to be like them. I emulate them for being able to leave an afterglow after having some challenging conversations. I have been known to leave an aftertaste, ladies and gentlemen. I'm getting better at it, but I've been known to leave an aftertaste. That's been my emotional wake. And I'll be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, I have worked for leaders that have left an aftermath, disaster after their conversations. So think about, what is your wake after conversations with your colleagues, with those who report to you, with your superiors? Do you even know what your ripple effect is? Because here's why. Look, as leaders, there's no trivial comment that we can make. Everything we say, even our nonverbal communication, leaves a ripple effect. Think back to a comment that maybe one of your leaders made to you in the past that upset you. Think back to the last conversation you had with a direct report or one of your colleagues. Do you know the impact of your message? Do you know the impact of that ripple effect? Let's admit it. We often have difficult messages to deliver in the workplace. We know that. It's part of business. Some conversations are a little more challenging, but the key is to learn how to deliver the message without the heavy load. Okay? The person who can most accurately describe reality, the person who can most accurately describe reality and what's going on without blaming others and without causing others to feel overly negative, that person is the leader, whether they have the title leader or not. So take responsibility for your emotional wake. Take responsibility for your ripple effect, how people are feeling after you have your conversations with them. And our seventh principle, let silence do the heavy lifting. Excuse me.
Luis, I can't hear you.
So sorry, ladies and gentlemen, my mute button got stuck. Thank you, Pankaj. Let's go back. Let silence do the heavy lifting. Science has shown, science research has shown that for people to make new connections in their brains in conversations, they need periods of silence. Silence is also a tool you can use to take the conversation to a deeper level. Sometimes we need to take conversations to a very deep level. Ask a question and allow for the silence. Allow for that person to process the question, come up with their response. Use silence in your conversations with other people, because that will allow everyone in the conversation to process new information, to come up with new insights, to come up with a response. Not only that, you need silence in conversation sometimes because emotions come up in conversation. Sometimes people need to feel the emotions that are coming up and let them settle. And in order to do that, we need silence. Insights, new ideas, new understandings, insights occur in the space between words. When there is no space between words, in other words, when there's no silence to think through, we can only skim the surface of the conversation with everyone just talking and talking and talking and talking and no allowing for just a period of silence for everyone to process. We can't take the conversation to a deeper level. I will tell you all right now, ladies and gentlemen, to be effective communicators, to have effective conversations, to have fierce conversations, require we take the conversation to a deeper level. Surface conversations never solved any big problems. They require deep conversations to solve any big problems, big or small problems, require deep conversations. Silence will allow us to take the conversation to a deeper level. Silence is a tool that you can use to take the conversation to a deeper level. Silence is the tool you can use in a conversation to allow everyone in the conversation to process new information, come up with a response, etc. So these are the 7 principles of highly effective leaders, the 7 communication tools that you can use immediately to improve your communication skills and thus your results, personal and professional. Notice these 7 principles apply in the business world as much as they do in your personal lives. You can enrich your relationships in your personal lives as well with these 7 principles. Which one has your name on it? Which one of these principles will you focus on in the next 30 days? Make a note of it. By now, one of them probably is jumping out at you. By now, you're already looking at one saying, oh yeah, that's the one. Make a note of it for yourself. Hold yourself accountable. Hold yourself to the challenge of getting better at that. To make these principles actionable for you, which one are you going to focus on in the next 30 days? I'm going to end our session today with one final cornerstone belief that we have here at Fierce Conversations. No single conversation is guaranteed to change the trajectory of a career, a company, a relationship, or a life, but any single conversation can. Any single conversation has the power to change the trajectory of any of those things if we show up to the conversation, if we start the conversation, if we engage in the conversation. If we don't, we cannot expect any of those things to change. So with that, oh, sorry about that. There we go. And so with that, now I'd like to open it up. We have a few minutes for any questions. If anyone has any questions, Pankaj.
Thank you. I think we have, thank you, Luis. This is a very insightful webinar. We have people joining from across the globe, from Philippines, from Saudi, from Dubai, from
Awesome.
India, and from Bangladesh.
Wonderful. Good to see. Good to have everyone.
Thanks for everyone. And I think that we have people from Oman too. Yes. So thank you, India, for pointing it out.
Hi, Oman, as well.
Hi, welcome, Oman. We are now open for questions. Please put it in chat. I have received 2 questions right now. And
Okay.
so I would like to ask you, Luis. One question which I have received is, how do you manage, especially in the hierarchical societies, how do we manage the fierce conversation where we really don't speak, we are not brought up like this, and how do we manage that?
Yeah.
So can you throw some light here?
Yeah, absolutely, Pankaj. Thank you. And I think it's very similar, or maybe the same question I'm seeing in the chat. You know, many cultures, including in Bangladesh, including in the Middle East, and even including in some Latin American countries where I'm currently in, the culture makes it difficult for people to muster the courage to speak up. But here's how we look at it. Look, if you don't speak up, think of what the results are going to be. If you see something that you want to speak up about and you don't speak up about it, I want you to think about what are the results if you hold back, if you don't speak. Then when you do speak up to whoever it is you're going to speak to about it, probably a leader perhaps, or maybe just a colleague, always start with the good intention. Show your good intention first. So in other words, how I would do that and how I have done that here in Mexico, where hierarchy is very important and status is very important, and being part of the team and going with the flow, all of that, very important. I start off by saying, There may be more to the picture here that I'm not aware of, but I need to point out an issue. I need to point out a roadblock. I need to point out a challenge that I see that could negatively affect the business. I might be wrong, but I'm just showing this from good intention. I want us to avoid any mistakes or any disasters or any roadblocks. So in these cultures, when you're showing good intention and you're showing that you're actually speaking up because you're looking out for the best interest of the team or of the organization, the leaders or others in these cultures will be more open and ready to hear what it is you have to say. You don't want to come in from the position of being right or to prove someone wrong or to look good. Hey, I found a breakdown in your plan, or there's an issue here, and you're trying to get maybe some spotlight on yourself for being the bright one or whatever. None of that will work. You have to come in with good intentions. I'm seeing a breakdown, or I'm seeing an issue. I'm seeing a challenge. We have a challenge from my perspective. I could be wrong. There may be more to the story, maybe more to the picture here that I'm aware of, but from what I do know, from what I do see, I think we should discuss this before it becomes a bigger issue. That is the approach we generally take in these cultures, because it shows the good intention, it shows the trust, and it shows that you're willing to put yourself on the line for the good of the organization or the company. I hope that helps. I hope that is a helpful response.
Thank you, Luis. Another good question asked by Rizwan is, in some of the cultures, they think the boss is always right. Then how do you change that culture in those organizations? But they've been, and that's the culture in some of the organizations. One, because of the hierarchy, and second, the age difference between the subordinates. And so they think the boss is always right, and boss is too overpowering, and they don't get a chance to speak up, right? They're so afraid to speak. How do we manage that?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me just thank you for the question. First of all, the mark of a great leader is not being right. Great leaders are not always right. Great leaders make the best decisions for the organization. That's what a great leader is. It's not about being right. Pankaj, you can be right. Ladies and gentlemen, you can be right about anything. You can get data to back yourself up and prove yourself right about anything. So what? I'm not impressed by how right someone is. It's about making the best decisions. How do we make the best decisions? Is by hearing from others. So from the perspective of a leader, if leaders are here in the room, I would encourage you to start inviting perspectives of others, your freshers, your younger than you, of the younger generation, etc. For those of us that are not leaders, this is an opportunity to have perhaps a one-on-one with your leader and share with them your ideas and let them know that you have ideas to share that you think are valuable, but that they hopefully would be able to find value in a variety of ideas. And you always want to come in from the perspective of, I'm here to help, I want to support. This is all from a support perspective. I will admit it's difficult to shift a culture overnight. You cannot do it. You cannot shift a culture in a country or a region overnight. That happens over hundreds of years. And you cannot change a culture in an organization overnight. But one conversation at a time, you can. And so for the people, for that, to go back to that question, leaders start openly inviting different perspectives so that you can make better decisions. And for those of you that are looking to have these conversations with your leaders, start by getting one-on-one with them and coming in with the true intention of wanting to support, and let them know you have ideas that you would like to share with them and see where it goes from there. I'll stop there because I know that we're at time, Pankaj. But
yes, we have just time. I think I just wanted to say thanks to everyone, and would like to announce that Fierce Conversation brings in excellent training modules on Fierce coaching, how to do Fierce conversation with teams, how to do a feedback, conversations. So if anyone interested, please let us know so that we can share all the information with all the participants. We have excellent white papers, podcasts, and a lot of thought leadership material from Fierce Conversation, which we would like to share with you. So thanks once again for joining this webinar. We have 5 more questions, Luis, but we'll answer offline. We understand, we respect everyone's time, but I once again thanks everyone for joining this webinar, and thanks Luis for, I know it's 3:30 a.m. for you in Mexico. Thanks so much for doing this. Have a lovely day. Bye for now.